Blondew's funeral oration by Bossuet. On a certain afternoon, which had, as will be seen hereafter, some coincidence with the events heretofore related, Laigle de Meaux was to be seen leaning in a sensual manner against the doorpost of the Café Musain. He had the air of a caryatid on a vacation. He carried nothing but his reverie, however. He was staring at the Place Saint-Michel. To lean one's back against a thing is equivalent to lying down while standing erect, which attitude is not hated by thinkers. Laigle de Meaux was pondering without melancholy over a little misadventure which had befallen him 2 days previously at the law school, and which had modified his personal plans for the future, plans which were rather indistinct in any case. Reverie does not prevent a cab from passing by, nor the dreamer from taking note of that cab. Laigle de Meaux, whose eyes were straying about in a sort of diffuse lounging, perceived, athwart his somnambulism, a two-wheeled vehicle proceeding through the place, at a foot pace and apparently in indecision. For whom was this cabriolet? Why was it driving at a walk? Laigle took a survey. In it, beside the coachman, sat a young man, and in front of the young man lay a rather bulky hand-bag. The bag displayed to passers-by the following name inscribed in large black letters on a card which was sewn to the stuff: Marius Pontmercy. This name caused Laigle to change his attitude. He drew himself up and hurled this apostrophe at the young man in the cabriolet. Monsieur Marius Pontmercy. The cabriolet thus addressed came to a halt. The young man, who also seemed deeply buried in thought, raised his eyes. "Hey?" said he. "You are M. Marius Pontmercy?" "Certainly." "I was looking for you," resumed Laigle de Meaux. "How so?" demanded Marius. For it was he. In fact, he had just quitted his grandfather's, and had before him a face which he now beheld for the first time. "I do not know you." "Neither do I know you," responded Laigle. Marius thought he had encountered a wag, the beginning of a mystification in the open street. He was not in a very good humor at the moment. He frowned. Laigle de Meaux went on imperturbably. "You were not at the school day before yesterday." "That is possible." "That is certain." "You are a student?" demanded Marius. "Yes, sir." "Like yourself." "Day before yesterday, I entered the school, by chance. You know, one does have such freaks sometimes. The professor was just calling the roll. You are not unaware that they are very ridiculous on such occasions. At the third call, unanswered, your name is erased from the list. 60 francs in the Gulf." Marius began to listen. It was Blondeau who was making the call. You know Blondeau, he has a very pointed and very malicious nose, and he delights to scent out the absent. He slyly began with the letter P. I was not listening, not being compromised by that letter. The call was not going badly. No erasures. The universe was present. Blondeau was grieved. I said to myself, "Blondeau, my love, you will not get the very smallest sort of an execution today." All at once Blondeau calls, "Marius Pontmercy." No one answers. Blondeau, filled with hope, repeats more loudly, "Marius Pontmercy." And he takes his pen. "Monsieur, I have bowels of compassion," I said to myself hastily. "Here's a brave fellow who is going to get scratched out. Attention! Here is a veritable mortal who is not exact. He's not a good student. Here is none of your heavy-sides, a student who studies, a greenhorn pedant, strong on letters, theology, science, and sapience, one of those dull wits cut by the square. A pin by profession. He is an honourable idler who lounges, who practices country jaunts, who cultivates the grisette, who pays court to the fair sex, who is at this very moment, perhaps, with my mistress. Let us save him. Death to Blondeau." At that moment, Blondeau dipped his pen in, all black with erasures in the ink, cast his yellow eyes round the audience room, and repeated for the third time, "Marius Pontmercy." I replied, present. This is why you were not crossed off. Monsieur, said Marius. And why I was, added Laigle de Meaux. I do not understand you, said Marius. Laigle resumed. Nothing is more simple. I was close to the desk to reply, and close to the door for the purpose of flight. The professor gazed at me with a certain intensity. All of a sudden, Blondeau, who must be the malicious nose alluded to by Boileau, skipped to the letter L. L is my letter. I am from Meaux, and my name is Lesgle. Laigle, interrupted Marius, what fine name. Monsieur, Blondeau came to this fine name, and called. Laigle. I reply. Present. Then Blondeau gazes at me, with the gentleness of a tiger, and says to me. If you are Pont Mercy, you are not Laigle. A phrase which has a disobliging air for you, but which was lugubrious only for me. That said, he crossed me off. Marius exclaimed. I am mortified, sir. First of all, interposed Laigle, I demand permission to embalm Blondeau in a few phrases of deeply felt eulogium. I will assume that he is dead. There will be no great change required in his gauntness, in his pallor, in his coldness, and in his smell. And I say, Erudimini qui judicatus terram. Here lies Blondeau. Blondeau the nose, Blondeau nasica, the ox of discipline, bos disciplini, the bloodhound of the password, the angel of the roll call, who was upright, square, exact, rigid, honest, and hideous. God crossed him off as he crossed me off. Marius resumed. I am very sorry. Young man, said Laigle de Meaux, let this serve you as a lesson. In future, be exact. I really beg you 1,000 pardons. Do not expose your neighbor to the danger of having his name erased again. I am extremely sorry. Laigle burst out laughing. And I am delighted. I was on the brink of becoming a lawyer. This erasure saves me. I renounce the triumphs of the bar. I shall not defend the widow, and I shall not attack the orphan. No more toga, no more stage. Here is my erasure all ready for me. It is to you that I am indebted for it, Monsieur Pontmercy. I intend to pay a solemn call of thanks upon you. Where do you live? In this cab, said Marius. A sign of opulence, retorted Laigle calmly. I congratulate you. You have there a rent of 9,000 francs per annum. At that moment, Courfeyrac emerged from the café. Marius smiled sadly. I have paid this rent for the last 2 hours, and I aspire to get rid of it. But there is a sort of history attached to it, and I don't know where to go. Come to my place, sir, said Courfeyrac. I have the priority, observed Laigle, but I have no home. Hold your tongue, Bossuet, said Courfeyrac. Bossuet, said Marius, but I thought that your name was Laigle. De Meaux, replied Laigle. By metaphor, Bossuet. Courfeyrac entered the cab. Coachman, said he, Hôtel de la Porte Saint-Jacques. And that very evening, Marius found himself installed in a chamber of the Hôtel de la Porte Saint-Jacques side by side with Courfeyrac. Chapter 3. Marius' Astonishments. In a few days, Marius had become Courfeyrac's friend. Youth is the season for prompt welding and the rapid healing of scars. Marius breathed freely in Courfeyrac's society, a decidedly new thing for him. Courfeyrac put no questions to him. He did not even think of such a thing. At that age, faces disclose everything on the spot. Words are superfluous. There are young men of whom it can be said that their countenances chatter. One looks at them and one knows them. One morning, however, Courfeyrac abruptly addressed this interrogation to him. By the way, have you any political opinions? The idea, said Marius, almost affronted by the question. What are you? A Democrat Bonapartist. The grey hue of a reassured rat, said Courfeyrac. On the following day, Courfeyrac introduced Marius at the Café Musain. Then he whispered in his ear, with a smile. I must give you your entry to the revolution." And he led him to the hall of the Friends of the ABC. He presented him to the other comrades, saying this simple word which Marius did not understand. A pupil. Marius had fallen into a wasp's nest of wits. However, although he was silent and grave, he was, nonetheless, both winged and armed. Marius, up to that time solitary and inclined to soliloquy, and to asides, both by habit and by taste, was a little fluttered by this covey of young men around him. All these various initiatives solicited his attention at once, and pulled him about. The tumultuous movements of these minds at liberty and at work set his ideas in a whirl. Sometimes, in his trouble, they fled so far from him, that he had difficulty in recovering them. He heard them talk of philosophy, of literature, of art, of history, of religion, in unexpected fashion. He caught glimpses of strange aspects. And, as he did not place them in proper perspective, he was not altogether sure that it was not chaos that he grasped. On abandoning his grandfather's opinions for the opinions of his father, he had supposed himself fixed. He now suspected, with uneasiness, and without daring to avow it to himself, that he was not. The angle at which he saw everything began to be displaced anew. A certain oscillation set all the horizons of his brains in motion. An odd internal upsetting. He almost suffered from it. It seemed as though there were no consecrated things for those young men. Marius heard singular propositions on every sort of subject, which embarrassed his still timid mind. A theatre poster presented itself, adorned with the title of a tragedy from the ancient repertory called classic. "Down with tragedy dear to the bourgeois!" cried Bahorel. And Marius heard Combeferre reply, "You are wrong, Bahorel. The bourgeoisie loves tragedy, and the bourgeoisie must be left at peace on that score. Bewigged tragedy has a reason for its existence, and I am not one of those who, by order of Aeschylus, contest its right to existence. There are rough outlines in nature. There are, in creation, ready-made parodies. A beak which is not a beak, wings which are not wings, gills which are not gills, paws which are not paws, a cry of pain which arouses a desire to laugh, there is the duck. Now, since poultry exists by the side of the bird, I do not see why classic tragedy should not exist in the face of antique tragedy." Or chance decreed that Marius should traverse Rue Jean-Jacques Rousseau between Enjolras and Courfeyrac. Courfeyrac took his arm. "Pay attention. This is the Rue Platriera, now called Rue Jean-Jacques Rousseau, on account of a singular household which lived in it 60 years ago. This consisted of Jean-Jacques and Therese. From time to time, little beings were born there. Therese gave birth to them, Jean-Jacques represented them as foundlings. And Enjolras addressed Courfeyrac roughly. Silence in the presence of Jean-Jacques. I admire that man. He denied his own children, that may be. But he adopted the people. Not one of these young men articulated the word. The Emperor. Jean Prouvaire alone sometimes said Napoleon, all the others said Bonaparte. Enjolras pronounced it Bonaparte. Marius was vaguely surprised. In idiom sapientiae.